All right. Welcome everybody to our monthly now Views from the Field discussion. Today we are going to be talking about some of the work we're doing here at the Kansas Rural Center um, with a local food promotion program project. That's a lot of P's that we are working on. We've called the Central Kansas Food Corridor. Before we dive in there, just a quick overview of our mission and I guess some of our high level goals um, to help ground, I guess, the work that we're doing. So at the Kansas Rural Center, we're working to promote the long-term health of the land and its people through research, education, and advocacy, focusing on developing sustainable food and farming systems that really emphasize what's sometimes called the triple bottom line. So things that are economically viable, ecologically sound, and socially just. Um, One of the key pieces that we feel in building that food system is diversified farming systems, both as a way to help farms build resilient futures, but also help communities have access to a range of foods and have farms that are also providing ecological services to the communities around them. So as part of that goal, or as part of that vision, I guess, want to highlight a few goals here in a second. The way we're going to go through today's talk, we're going to talk for a little while and then open things up for questions. So I'm going to start off with kind of a high level overview of our LFPP work, our local food promotion program. I'll try and avoid acronyms as much as possible, but that one probably will slip in. So LFPP is Local Food Promotion Program, and talk about the high level view of that project, the work of our partners, and then Ryan is going to talk a little bit about food hubs and what do we mean by that. And then Ryan and Teresa are going to talk about the work they've been doing because they are the sort of primary program staff on this project. As we move along, if you have questions, we I think have plenty of time to discuss and take questions towards the end. If you do have questions as we're talking, though, please put those in the chat, and we will try and address them at a time that works best. So maybe address some of them as we move along, but if there's things needing deeper discussion, we'll try and save those towards the end. And so with those sort of housekeeping overviews, we'll dive in into our local food promotion program, uh, Central Food Hub, Central Kansas Food Corridor. So one of the things that just want to kind of ground, moving from those high level like mission and vision, thinking about some of the goals we do, and these are embodied in this specific project, but also in a lot of the work we do. So with that diversified farming systems, we see one of the key goals is to get more farmers on the land. And then here's a key thing with successful businesses. One of the key features for sustainability in this system is not only, good ecological practices, but the farms have to make enough money to stay in business. And so the way we help to support that is through training beginning farmers, working on the advocacy level to increase social supports for new and beginning farmers and small and diversified farmers. We work on developing markets, which is kind of central to what we're going to be talking about here today. And we also support farms in finding funding for farm expansion and improvement. Um, so one of the key results of this is helping develop access to healthy and local foods for consumers. So working at the farm scale, hopefully we get these outcomes for consumers. So more places able to sell local products, more young people, but also just general citizens of Kansas who are more educated about food and farm goings on. And all of this is kind of our goal to build a more resilient regional food system. So with those kind of high level overviews. I'll dive into our project just a little bit here, just from the top, and sort of when we started conceiving of this project, I was inspired by the work that's really, I think, best exemplified, or maybe that's going on other places, and I don't know about it. But in the state of Iowa, they have this amazing network of food hubs that work across the state and cooperate with each other to move local products, to support farms, so that they have, instead of just small, very localized, food hubs and distribution systems, they've created a network to create a real regional distribution system up there. And so I've been inspired by that. At the same time, Ryan, who lives in central Kansas, was talking to farmers, and they were interested in a food hub. So we started talking about this project that would help to develop a network of farmers selling locally, hopefully at some point organized into sort of a food hub in central Kansas. At that time, we had the KC Food Hub working in the Kansas City and Northeast Kansas area, and the High Plains Food Co-op out on the western edge of the state. So there was this kind of like big gaping hole for that food distribution in the middle of the state of Kansas. So it made sense to us that we could try and encourage the development of that sort of, I guess depending on how you define local or regional, localized or regional food system in the central part of the state that then we could connect across the state. And so with that vision sort of inspiring us, at the time we started developing an application for local food promotion program grant, which is a USDA grant funded through the Farm Bill. And we encountered some partners who were working in the region doing complementary work, and were also interested in sort of partnering with us. So these are common ground producers and growers in Wichita who have a unique mobile market model where they are aggregating local products in Wichita and serving Wichita and a number of surrounding communities with mobile markets that show up, primarily targeting underserved areas, especially those with senior citizens. And so we partnered with them as a way to sort of help amplify some of the work that they were doing. And also Kansas Wesleyan, with their community resilience hub, was really just getting started in how to build more community and food system resilience in the Salina area. So partnered with them to help expand that mobile market model north from Wichita up to Salina, and help engage producers across the region. So with those partners, we applied for a local food promotion program grant, and we were successful in that. I just want to put a plug in here. We'll have more info at the end. But that grant program, there is an open call for applications right now. It's a great tool for doing this kind of work, building food systems. So want to encourage people who are interested in the ideas to think about applying for that. We'll have a webinar coming up next week that we can promote at the end of the webinar. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Ryan to get more into the details.
All right, thank you, Tom. I'm Ryan Goertzen-Regier. I'm the program and admin manager here at KRC, and part of my job is to work on this project with my coworker Teresa Kelly, who you'll hear from a little bit later. But kind of wanted to go into some different information about food hubs. You might, if you're in the local food or the food system space these days, you might hear the term food hub a lot. It's a pretty hot word, hot concept. And I wanted to give kind of a USDA sort of definition of a food hub versus some of the ways that we at the Kansas Rural Center have been thinking about developing a food hub and how that might differ a little bit. But, at the very base level, food hub is, the work of aggregating, marketing, and distributing local foods or regional foods together to serve different markets, and typically more of a wholesale market. So you might see that like 15 different smaller farmers working together to combine what they have available to serve a larger wholesale market, like a school district, cafeteria, hospital system, a number of different restaurants. I think in general, the idea is, like it says in the definition here, increasing or strengthening their ability to satisfy wholesale and institutional demand, where one farm, if they're on a smaller scale, might struggle to provide what a school district needs. 15 farmers together might be able to do that kind of thing, and thus increase some of the marketing opportunities for all of them, and find some good networking and camaraderie through that, hopefully. So at the base level, just a business that is actively managing, aggregating, distributing, and marketing those food products. And I guess kind of a different way of looking at it. Some of the things that we've discovered through talking about food hubs, also talking to school districts through some farm to school initiatives, is kind of this importance on number 2 here of providing a one-stop shopping kind of experience for wholesale customers. Just like for a small farmer, it might be difficult to manage contracts with 20 different restaurants. And that takes a lot of time and mental energy. For a school district, a busy school system that has probably reduced food service staff than they did 30 years ago. Maybe not even as good of facilities as they did for raw food prep. The idea of trying, even if the school district wants to have local food in the cafeteria for the students, the idea of trying to source as much food as they need from 20 or 30 different different farmers, different sources, is a much bigger lift than being able to buy from a single source like a food hub. We're used to buying things from an organization like Cisco, where things show up on a truck. And so in some ways, a food hub is kind of trying to be that intermediary between a group of producers, that wholesale customer, hopefully simplifying the equation kind of on both sides, to make it a little bit easier for everyone. So that's kind of the general idea we came with. And I think I talked about most of this, but I'll just say a number of the beginning farmers I've talked to, different people across the state, sometimes want to, or I guess I hear a lot that people care a lot about their communities, and they want to grow food for their neighbors. They want to grow food for the community, and maybe for a school district near them or something like that. People take a lot of pride in those things, and feel strongly about that. But what I've heard and what I find is that people really struggle to make a living doing smaller scale farming or food production if they live further away from a metro area. And so, I come from a town of 500 people in rural Kansas. It would maybe be difficult for me to live there in my community, farm there, and be able to make a living. But if I can find a way to get my products into larger wholesale markets and larger metro areas, that might help me bolster that income and make my farm more viable. And so part of at least my hope and my design in this project is to find ways that through maybe farmers coming together, a food hub style organization, that people could move their products further or combine with other farmers to meet some of those wholesale demands, maybe a little further away, and still be able to live and enrich the rural communities that they want to live in. Another point that I've looked on a lot is kind of the stress and time load on farmers to do all of the marketing themselves, to do all of the delivery themselves, like that example I talked about earlier, trying to contract with 10, 15, 20 different restaurants to deliver your food. For some folks, the ability to reduce the time and for marketing and delivery by delivering wholesale to a food hub might be a more viable thing for them, economically, possibly, but also just socially and interpersonally, to give them, some time and less stress, spend time with their family, or doing other things that they feel are more important. So these were some of the goals that we had kind of getting into food hub development, thinking about that down here in central Kansas. And I think I covered this one as well, kind of talking about why some organizations like school districts might want to buy from a food hub rather than lots of individual farmers. So we kind of defined an area to work in with this grant project as these 12 counties. Um, following I-135 from the Wichita area up through Salina, kind of the counties that surround that, as a place that we wanted to see if we can move food around on these major roadways to kind of the Wichita and Salina larger population hubs, and provide opportunities for farmers in these outlying communities. Um, so that has been kind of our target area for all of the work here. We've been working, gone through a number of iterations of things we've tried, providing education, providing technical assistance and support to individual farmers. We determined pretty early on that we, as the Kansas Rural Center, didn't want to own and operate a for-profit food hub, or start an initiative like that. We're not in that place to be able to do that. And so it was really important to us to try and make whatever we help develop be hopefully a farmer-led and farmer-owned cooperative initiative. So similar to how larger row crop grain farmers might own or be members of a cooperative grain elevator or system like that, having that membership and that ability to kind of design, inform a little bit more of your own destiny, rather than just selling to a wholesaler. We felt like it was important that farmers had more power in that relationship, because often, especially if you're selling more into wholesale markets, you kind of have to take the price you're given. You have to buy inputs at the price you're given, and farmers have very little power in different parts of that relationship, often, if you're a large farmer or a small farmer. And so thinking about how we wanted to do business development or food hub development, we really wanted to keep as much individual farmer power in that relationship as possible. And so having a group that is hopefully governed by the farmers who belong to it, where they can adjust it if they aren't getting what they need from it, or have, recourse rather than just taking a price, were some of the ideals that we kind of brought to this project. I'm gonna pass it off to Teresa to talk a little bit more about where we're at with some of those things, but I just have this slide that has some of our contact information. But for her talk, I guess maybe I should just rewind it to this map. What do you think, Teresa? Is that okay?
Sure. I run my cursor over it like I'm showing people where the road is and all that, and I realize no one can see it but me. So anyway, um, so my work over the last couple of years has been trying to connect the dots and sow seeds of interest and gauging interest and connecting folks. Um, oh, you do. You see my cursor right there? Okay, good to know. Thank you. A to help strengthen all the things that Ryan and Tom said, but the boots on the ground part is to identify need, identify market demand, identify sourcing and what that looks like, to help bring all of this together into, a big, I think today my metaphors are around meal prep. So, to make or take a recipe for creating something that can help everyone grow their businesses, whether it's farming, whether it's, the folks at the school who want to incorporate local food once a week or once a month into their programs, or distributors who have, the capability to move things, processors who have the capability to process and distribute, to start connecting all of those dots. And with this broad of a geographical area, I have come to consider, I worked at the Kansas City Food Hub, and when I first started there, they were working in a sub-hub model, which shifted over time because it's a farmer-owned, farmer-run business, and we were able to shift that model with the pandemic to figure out something more efficient. But in a broad area like this, it came to make more sense that we might develop, like Tom mentioned, a network of smaller hubs that we're aggregating and distributing, and then maybe a larger pipeline to connect all that. So I was noodling that around last year, and then they announced the RFSI grants, the Resilient Food System, what
Infrastructure.
infrastructure, thank you. All the acronyms. So when they announced those, I took a look at the list and all the projects and the amount of money in our roughly 12 county area amounted to that. Those projects specific to these counties and a couple of projects bordering amounted to $1 million worth of infrastructure and programming going into this part of the world. And so I thought, wow. And then looking at the list, there was some overlap and then there were gaps. So I thought, so we called a meeting together, and the cohort, I guess the idea started with that question. Have these people ever talked to each other? Have they ever shared information? Do they even know what everybody else is doing? So we convened a meeting of the RFSI recipients in March. And a lot of common themes came out of that. They were all thrilled to be able to meet the other people doing other projects, because it's a lot of good work going on in the corridor, everything from a commercial kitchen to freezers to distribution, business planning. So we met, and I thought it was really important. I didn't invite a lot of agencies. I invited the people who got the awards, because I feel like it's important for peer-to-peer development. If we're looking at farmer run, farmer owned, that's who we need to have in the room. So we had a small group, small, powerful group of people that came together, and a couple of common themes came up. What do we have to share with each other? We need to break down silos and work together when we can. And transportation is a common issue that comes up. That happens to be my soapbox if anyone knows me well. Peer-to-peer counseling, consulting, funding and or policy changes to support farmers and business growth. When we met, those funds, the RSFI funds had been frozen. So there were a lot of people in limbo. Some folks had spent their money already. Others were in the middle and hadn't been reimbursed, but had done the outlay, and others were getting ready to do that. So it was a mix of folks in the room. And then also to have a common place to share ideas, to keep coming together and to reach out to others besides this group. So that we took that and started putting the pieces together, and we're at a point now to where we want to invite a larger group. And that's why I wanted to talk about this today, to seed this. I look at that first meeting as, I threw a pebble in the pond, not me, a collective me, with my coworkers and others who are supporting all of this. But we threw that pebble in the pond, and now, there's been a couple of ripples, and now the ripples are getting larger, and we'd like to have more voices in the room. That's been a consistent thing. Let's get more people in the room, but we needed a platform. So we now have a platform to provide for discussion, and we're going to be having a gathering on July 29th prior to the local food summit from 1 to 3:30 to talk about this. And so development and talking about, what it really is like to develop these food businesses into a hub structure, or is that what you really want? And, I believe in coactive work. So, we did a interactive activity or two at that March meeting, and we'll be doing the same thing the day before in our session from 1 to 3 in July. So I look forward to having a lot of new people. It's a statewide opportunity too. So if, we're kind of focused on this central Kansas cohort, but there's room to seed that in other parts of the state and even going out into the other states. I'm a big vision person, so I'm already picturing this connecting up to Kansas City and other places like that. So so yeah, that's my talk about the cohort. I think we have two models that I'll hold up. The Kansas City Food Hub has gone through a lot of transition, and that's what's nice about being a farmer-owned, farmer-run cooperative, is that they make the decisions, and then their operations, is support and can activate the things that they want to do. So they were able to pivot, like in the pandemic when I was there, the hub was able to pivot to the need in the moment. And then that model kind of faded, and the business shifted, and it kind of outgrew that, and now it's into a different model. It's still doing business, it's still doing wholesale only now, and trying some new business things. But that's the resiliency you can have when you're a community, basically a farm community owned business. And then Juniper Hill Farms, Scott has he's run an amazing business. I think he's up to 4 businesses now up in the Lawrence area. And he considers himself not a food hub, but a food aggregator and distributor. I asked him what I needed to refer to him as, and that's what he said. He said food hub he feels like that can get, well, it has many meanings now in the world. And so he likes to consider himself a local food distributor, and he's done a good job on logistic planning and likes to share that information. So he and Thomas, the business director now from the KC Food Hub, will be there the day before at that session from 1 to 3. So I guess the other thing I wanted to say, in the last 2 years while I've been doing my value chain work, I didn't say who I was. I'm the value chain coordinator for KRC. I've done a lot of farm to school work, and looking at wholesale and the need to scale up, and the understanding of what that really looks like if you're going to be doing large distribution, and what the capacity of the farmers are. And I'm I'm really happy to be involved in an organization that's growing farmers, whether it's our programming or we're stewarding folks into other programming. We're helping grow the farmers that we're going to need to scale up to make a more robust system here in Central Kansas and then beyond. Um, I made some notes while you were talking, Ryan. Um, um, I guess when it's important, I heard recently that you need a customer before you start a food hub. And it's more, for me, it's more the chicken and the egg. You have to cultivate the desire on both sides. But schools, now their funding situation, as we know, any of us in the food system, the funding situation is kind of weird right now, but there's this appetite for local food and supporting, especially out here in rural Kansas, supporting their communities. So schools are more willing and open to talk to local producers and figure out how that works. And so that's how we can give tech assist. The farm to school folks, farm to fork folks at our state level can have programming and things to help that. But it seems like that's an easy entry level for local food producers, um, because you can experiment. You're never going to be able to supply everything. You can pick 1 or 2 things and just experiment with how that relationship can work. So that's the other piece that I've been really working with. So And I guess so, me being where I am in my life, I remember when I was going to school, the cafeteria folks, cafeteria ladies, they're not that anymore. They made everything. Sweet rolls, spaghetti, they made everything from scratch. And then somewhere in the 80s, that all got lost into commissary. And now I've seen, at least my experience in working farm to school in the last couple of years, I've seen more of an interest in the schools going back to that in-house meal preparation. They still are a little understaffed, and storage is an issue. So that's a couple of the things we have to work with as far as challenges with that venue. But I think I'm going to stop there, and if there's any questions or anything, folks can, or comments. I mean, this is for conversation too, so I'm ready to take notes if people have suggestions or questions about anything that the three of us have talked about.
I'll add just a little bit of commentary yet first, if that's okay. I'll just say, as we started this process and really have been looking for, over the last couple of years, that catalyst or that group of farmers who are interested in these ideas, but not only interested, also have the time and the energy to like put into developing a whole other entity or collaborating with other people. I think a lot of people might feel the way that I feel, which is tired. There's just a lot going on, and I think we just a lot of folks out there in food system work are kind of weary, and so we've had a lot of stops and starts through this work. Identifying folks who were really energized, really felt like they had the capacity and the resources to start on this work. And as we got further into it and worked to resource them and help them build those ideas, kind of decided, this isn't actually the right thing for me right now, or maybe I don't even want to farm anymore. I'm going to quit farming and move away, or like there's just a lot of what's been clear to me about trying to do this kind of work is that it's not a quick thing at all to do, and being able to take a slower approach and really try to work with people and lift them up, and find the folks who are ready to move forward has been kind of a challenge. But I do think, like Teresa said, some of these big grant opportunities that we saw in the last couple of years that provided funding for equipment purchases or infrastructure investment, which is not very typical for grant funding, particularly government funding that just allows you to buy equipment outright and own it. Like this regional food system infrastructure grant was really helpful. And also some of these things like the pending Heartland Regional Food Business Center Business Builder Grant, identifying those folks who are already working to scale up and grow their businesses and bring those folks together and say, look, you're all on an upward trajectory already. Do you want to do that together, possibly, and realize even more, benefits from networking and collaborating and having some camaraderie? So I think that's really, we probably haven't made as much progress earlier on as we wanted to, but I think the moment might be right with the right people and the right kind of timing, and so that feels good to me. So I'll just add some of those notes. But I had this out there. This is some of the stuff we were talking about earlier. That session at the local food summit is at the bottom there, and a link to that again is on Tuesday, July 29 from 1 to 3. I think Amanda put that in the chat. Thank you, Amanda. And we also, like Tom mentioned, have a grant opportunity overview webinar next Monday at noon about the LAMP grants, which local food, what is LAMP? A local agricultural market program. I wrote it there for myself. LAMP is kind of an umbrella that has several other grant opportunities under it, of which our local food promotion program grant is one of them. So LAMP grant has several different opportunities, and we'll talk about some of those. This is a very quick turnaround time for a federal grant like this, so not to be taken on lightly for sure. But if you're interested in that, you could sure register at kansasruralcenter.org/webinar. As Tom put in the chat, thank you, Tom. And we'll have that recorded as well if anybody wants to view that later on. I was also going to mention briefly before we have questions, one of our coworkers, Leslie, is a farm business navigator, and she, in her role, provides technical support for a number of these services you see listed here, and works with the Heartland Regional Food Business Center. That's heartlandfoodbusiness.org at the bottom there. If you are looking for some business planning support or advice in different areas, Leslie is an excellent person to check in with to see if she can help you or has knowledge of resources that could be beneficial to you. So I think we have other things here, but that's pretty much it.
I just wanted to add a couple of things. So somebody asked if the slides or notes would be available. We are recording this. And I will say, so with the LAMP grants, which, as Ryan said, is local agriculture marketing program, typically that covers the local food promotion program, the farmers market promotion program, the regional food systems partnership program, and the value added producer grant is what falls under that sort of LAMP umbrella. But I will say on Monday, we're also going to be talking about the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Program. It's kind of a one-time program in terms of the allocation, at least so far. But Kansas Department of Agriculture didn't expend all of their funds in their first round of applications. So they are going to open another round of applications that I've been told ideally those will open sometime next week. Depending on the timeline, it might be within the next couple of weeks. And those are going to be equipment only grants up to $50,000. Again, like Ryan said, that's kind of a unique opportunity because a lot of federal grants don't allow you to buy equipment. So this is kind of unique. So definitely, if you're interested in that, keep your eyes out. I think the application window is going to be open for about 6 weeks. So that one you will have a little bit more time from here. But the challenge is that due to the federal program, that those funds have to be expended and the project's wrapped up by the end of the year. So have a little bit of time to pull together the application, but then really quick to do whatever you're going to do with that or buy the equipment you're going to buy. So just want to highlight that for sure. And then there is another question in the chat here from David. So what role do you see for a food hub to help stock local grocery stores or even function as a standalone grocery store in rural food desert type areas?
Yeah, I mentioned schools a lot just as kind of an easy to understand example, I think, but the local grocery stores, especially coming from a small town, I would love to see that. I'd love to see a food hub be able to serve that. Especially in, during COVID, we saw some places where like Cisco decided they didn't want to service smaller communities and said, you don't buy enough to warrant us, coming past your store. And we saw some, innovation come out of that. I think like grocery stores working together to do larger orders so that then they could maybe backhaul to one another and fulfill those kind of things. But yeah, definitely not schools at the exclusion of other things. One complication I think we could see is, that offset of the growing season and when grocery stores need food like year round. That's a similar problem for school districts because the major school season is not as much when producers are in production unless you have lots and lots of covered production structures. So I joked initially that we should set up a regional canning line. So when we have excess tomatoes around Kansas, that they could be sold or bought by a canning infrastructure. And then, when schools are used to already opening number 10 cans from Cisco or whoever to make food, could we replicate that with local food and just have them pay more for local food, but not have to do extra work of lots of raw, fruit and vegetable prep, especially in the off season. I thought that was crazy. I'm not so sure that's actually a crazy idea, but there may be some things like that that would be interesting to look at, in my opinion. But
I will say
Well,
also in this sort of, if we use the term food hub in a very broad sense, there are some models. There's one that's often called a farm stop that appears to be getting a little traction across the nation, which is uh, kind of, I guess, maybe like a grocery store, but it's a shop that is a hub for local farms to sell things often on consignment. So almost like a bricks and mortar farmers market might be a way to kind of think about it, except that, it's probably staffed by someone, not like farmers standing behind each of their own tables, but more kind of like a food hub, but a very retail facing sort of food hub. So there are some models that could address those in addition to a food hub selling to already existing grocery stores. Sorry, Teresa, I didn't
well,
mean to cut you.
that's all right. There's just when you start talking about rural, logistics are usually top of mind. How do you deliver consistently in a volume that pays for the transportation and pays the farmer well, and can deliver a consistent and quality product to the consumer. So that's why I think, a lot of rural groceries end up having to do the route with the bigger wholesale distributors, or you end up with Dollar General being your grocery store. So I can't really speak to the whole realm of grocery, but what I can speak to is the experience I've had with the few that I've worked with. There's actually a hardware store that I've worked with that they operate as kind of a mercantile. So they distribute local canned, or they sell local canned goods. They sell local transplants they sell, they're a delivery or pickup point for, um, local farmers CSA, and they're working on something. We met a few months ago, and they're working on a broader opportunity because they're in an area that serves several small towns. So it's a possibility that they could set up an online order system with this farmer, and then there's other farmers that could join that to make one of those mini hubs that I spoke to and that Tom has mentioned, to help distribute food that way. But right now, the hardware store, he's selling local cheese, or like Alma cheese. He's sourcing from Kansas for his folks there. And also, it's on a highway that before the turnpike was a major highway. So they used to have, they still have travelers that take the scenic route, that there's no place to get food. So he has those things there, and he keeps a 5-gallon gas can behind his counter too. So he's kind of that all-purpose stop, which is what you end up having to do out in areas where you aren't getting served. But I don't think, when we talk about local food, we would all love to be able to just live off a local. I mean, that would be the pipe dream that we all want. But no one in Kansas is ever going to be able to get me lemons. Well, maybe, but wouldn't we be worth the time to grow them for the grower, and I wouldn't be able to afford to buy them and pay them a living wage, or coffee, or caffeinated tea from real tea leaves. There's certain things you're not going to be able to do. There's a lot of things that we can. So I think looking at it as a supplemental thing, and even with the schools, they're looking at 1 day a week. Their meat they can freeze, so it's a larger production line. But if you can just start with that 1 day a week to build, and so I'm saying a lot around one point, I think. But for me, the overall thing is the logistics behind servicing these rural groceries. Like, is there some guy who wants just drive his truck in circles twice a week to deliver local produce from a central location? So I mean, that's something that's waiting to happen, and all the planning around that would have to work out. So I don't know. There's opportunity there.
There's another question or kind of a follow-up question here. So if you're thinking about that, maybe the sub-hub model, what would the minimum infrastructure requirements be for the sub-hub as opposed to a larger sort of central hub? Maybe do you want to take that, Teresa, since you've probably got the most experience on that?
Again, it depends on what you're looking at. How much volume you're going to be doing, and if it's set up like a CSA order ahead model where the farmer drops things off at a central location, are people going to be able to pick it up in a window? What window of time do you need refrigerator space? How much do you need? What is your volume going to be? I mean, the biggest, so it's all those hard things, how much really cold storage do you need? How much just like room temperature type storage? I won't I can't off the top of my head tell you the temperatures that tomatoes and things like that should be kept at, but they don't need to be kept as cold as say lettuce. So, what kind of, do you need freezer space? Is a walk-in freezer what you really need, or do you just need an upright or chest refrigerator? So I think identifying how much volume you're doing is the first step in figuring out what you need. And then figuring out, how often, like if it's turning over every day, you don't need as much space. Um, so yeah, there's all kinds of math you can do around that. So it would be a conversation. I would love to either talk with you, David, or connect you with other people who are running food hubs right now that could answer those questions more thoroughly for you. So my email is teresa.kelly@kansasruralcenter.org. So I'm happy to help you explore that, because it sounds like you're talking more about something you would like to do in your community or see as an opportunity.
Yeah, and I would just say, like, in terms of the minimum, like Teresa mentioned, depending on what you're moving, the places I've seen that have done that, it's basically the starting point is a farmer with excess capacity of some fashion. That could be that they're driving a truck somewhere that's only half full, so they could fill it with their neighbor's products. That could be a walk-in cooler that they don't totally fill every day, or maybe they have some seasons that it's full and other seasons that it's not. But any kind of, that excess capacity, if you can be in touch with other farmers, there might be a way to make that work better for both of you, so that like your coolers are full, or if you're making a delivery run, you're helping somebody else out, but also, you know like they can chip in for gas. Is kind of, so it's like, the minimum requirement is sort of like bounded by the creativity of whoever's partnering, but there needs to be some surplus capacity, I suppose, that you're trying to partner together to fill.
Did that answer your question, David?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Where are you located?
We're in Marion County, kind of,
Okay.
yeah, central Marion County. So we
I
have a
might
lot
be
of
able to hook.
independent growth.
Oh, so I can hook you up with some other resources because I've talked to some folks over there. So, okay,
Cool.
great.
Uh,
Thank you for your questions.
Yeah, thank
on
you.
the on the small sub-hub idea, I'll just add the one of the producers, who's been really interested on food hub development here in central Kansas. In a previous place he lived, he and two other producers just agreed to kind of work together, and I think they maybe all delivered to the same restaurants, but then they found a way to share that transportation and gas mileage. And I think every week or every other week, they just traded who was driving the orders there, and paid for the gas, shared that cost. And that, I think, more or less was kind of a sub hub sort of style of getting together and sharing some of the needs there and delivery schedule. So I think it could be really small and informal. It could be a lot more formal and structured and have actual contracts. There's a lot of different ways you could do it, but
Yeah, I see Shelley has a question here about This is very confusing compared to large ag and not sure why. It's easier to sell 50,000 bushels of soybeans than rabbit, beef, veggies. How are people making this startup work? That is a great question. Yeah.
That's kind of what I was trying to get to earlier is there is the infrastructure in place, the systems in place. I come from a longstanding, conventional farming family, and we could just take our grain to the cooperative elevator and the marketing agency sells it for us. And that kind of stuff just doesn't, I guess all the shops are there that know how to fix the big trucks and the equipment, and that kind of infrastructure and support services just doesn't exist for smaller producers, especially wanting to sell, specialty crops or fruits and vegetables around here. And some of that is what we're, I think, hoping to develop more. How people make it work, I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I would say, how people make it work, that really varies from place to place. But I do want to highlight Ryan's point about like a lot of that infrastructure. Some of it used to exist and doesn't anymore. Most farms in America, 50 years ago were a lot more diversified than they are now. They had a lot of different enterprises, and a lot of those were things that were marketed more locally, as that's kind of streamlined and the ag trade has really globalized, I guess. There's been a hollowing out, and then some of it never was. I mean, there weren't that much refrigeration locally. So building and or rebuilding that infrastructure is really important. And that's why programs like the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Program are pretty critical, because a lot of the farmers and food businesses working in this realm are, limited on capital. The models to do that are, fewer and further between than the models for some, conventional ag operations. So it takes trial and experimentation and support. So
It's unfortunate because, in modern times, getting into conventional agriculture, if you don't come from as I'm sure you all know, if you don't come from a farm family, it's really hard to buy all the equipment, land access, capital access for growing conventionally on large fields. And so for a lot of folks that I talk to, at least, they want to farm and they want to feed their communities and do that, but you really have to do it on a smaller acreage, unless you have an inn, for most people. And then none of these supports are there, and that kind of just perpetuates it remaining really difficult. So
and I will say, just as maybe a follow-up on Ryan's point there, is that, one of the attractants to some of these alternatives is, even though it does require capital, maybe that isn't the same as a conventional farming operation. Like, my parents both grew up on farms, but I did not. So I guess I count as a first generation farmer, and there's no way I could have afforded an operation that would allow me to grow 50,000 bushels of soybeans. Like, absolutely not something in the cards, but I could buy 30 acres and grow vegetables and figure out how to make that happen.
So, gosh, I don't know where to say and talk about, but in questioning why it's so difficult, I think just the answer to that is everything we eat is considered specialty crops. I mean, well, meat's not called that, but our vegetables and stuff that humans consume are considered specialty crops. So the whole system around farming is really set up for those commodities, which Tom and Ryan just spoke to. So I've always found that as a big misnomer. Um, Basic logistics are always the problem when we're talking about local food. And then Shelley talked about trying to see who said what here. So who said Margaret, I guess, said something about pricing. Yeah, so one of the nice things if you're developing a co-op and you're working with your peers, I think that's why I think it's really phenomenal that this group of people are starting to talk to each other. You can have these kind of conversations with each other and problem solve. And I, I believe that farmers, there's a lot of people that don't make what they need to be making, teachers, the cafeteria folks, farmers. I mean, without all of this, what would people do, right? So, I think you're right. People expect to go to farmers market to find, cheap stuff, and they forget that farmers need to make a living, and that's an education piece that, and when you're working in your community and you get to know your farmers and as a consumer, I like to know who's growing my food. So that's just part of the process, I think. Let's see. There was something else I wanted to talk about. Oh, pushback from either family or community thinking you're the crazy one jumping off the rails and going in a new direction outside of the conventional realm. I've talked to a farmer who won't come to these gatherings. He's been persecuted in his own home by folks that don't believe that in what he's doing. His community, he's kind of like the leper out there. And so he has asked to remain anonymous as far as everything we're doing. So I call him and we talk about stuff, but he doesn't feel safe in his own community because he's doing different stuff. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done as far as educating and, you know, reworking our system to where this isn't unusual. This is the way we do things, but that's my soapbox. I don't see,
I'd maybe add a note about, the viability of doing this kind of production. And, I'm in a beginning farmer space myself. And some of the hope that I had of developing, maybe food hub or cooperative farmer network in central Kansas was the idea that if other people want to be beginning farmers and get into production, they can focus on growing and have an immediate avenue for that marketing and delivery of their products. When you're a farmer, you have to be an expert or at least good enough at so many things, planting, growing, harvesting all the stuff that you're growing, but then delivering things, making those marketing relationships, all the repair of your equipment, whatever you all know what I mean. Hundreds of different skills that you should have probably if you're a farmer. And so my hope kind of was that as KRC's ideal of having more people farming and more people on the land, maybe having access to a food hub in this region means that people can focus a little more on some of their business fundamentals and startup, and an organization like a food hub could help get them off the ground by providing access to some of these other details that they don't have to do on their own then and just struggle constantly. And it's always going to be a struggle, but not quite as hard. So
Thank you, Ryan. Really appreciate the conversation. Thanks everybody for joining us today. It's just after 1, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. As both Teresa and Ryan have said, if you have follow-up questions or want to continue the discussion, feel free to reach out to us, and hope to talk to you again sometime. Thanks, everybody.